Welcome to First Light, the podcast that sparks your morning with stories of resilience, vision, and unstoppable drive. I'm your host, Chris Keller, and each episode we sit down with trailblazers who've turned their dreams into reality. People who remind us that first light of any great journey begins with a single step. Today we're joined by Mogill, the founder and CEO of Crisp, a powerhouse company that's redefining how law firms grow and connect with their clients. From starting with just $500 to building an 8-figure enterprise, Mogill's journey is a masterclass in grit, strategy, and relentless focus. He's also the host of the Game Changing Attorney podcast and a visionary who's helped thousands of attorneys transform their practices. Get ready for a conversation packed with insights on leadership, overcoming obstacles, and what it really takes to change the game. Let's dive in. Mogill, thank you so much for joining me today on First Light. This podcast wouldn't have been possible without you and your inspiration. And I can honestly say, and I know I've said it to you in videos, but I wouldn't be where I am today without you and your influence. And so I am excited to share your journey with my audience because of the impact that you've had on both me and my firm, which has, impacted so many other people around me. Your impact has just been amazing. So can you kind of take us back to your origin story and share kind of who you are that's made such a massive impact on the lives of so many?
Yeah, it's I guess we can really go back to the beginning. So I am a first generation immigrant. My family and I, we immigrated here from Eastern Europe. We were refugees. We came over here. I was 4 years old. I came over here with my parents. It was my brother and I. And when we got here, we were essentially starting over, right? My dad was an engineer. My mom was a nurse, but both of their degrees didn't transfer. So they had to start over. My dad became a mechanic and my mom was a hairdresser. I was the first one to learn how to speak English in a, it's kind of funny because I was 4 years old, but English in some ways is like my second language. First one to learn how to, read and write, first one to go to college, all those things. I grew up in I will say we didn't have much financially by any means, but I did grow up with, two, amazing parents and very, very supportive parents, very entrepreneurial from an early age. This is where, before I think being an entrepreneur was really a thing. So I would just get in trouble at school. So there was some people would do trading cards. And then there was those years ago, it was called Pogs. They were these little circular discs. And the kids at school absolutely loved them. And I found that, you could buy these in bulk cheaper and then you could sell them at school. But I think I was in first or second grade. And, that was probably one of the first times my parents got called in, to just because I had gotten in trouble. They saw it as gambling, right? Then, years later, I think when I was 13, maybe 15, started a web design company. This is way back in the front page Dreamweaver days. And I was just creating websites for various businesses. I didn't think of anything of it at the time, but now that I look back, having these people come to our home, enter through our front door, and my mom would greet them, and then we'd sit down and work on their website. I guess that was a little bit unique. And let's see, I'll kind of skip forward a bit to where I did the traditional path. When you have immigrant parents, it's either doctor or lawyer. So I went to college for pre-med, took the MCAT, got into med school, and just I'd spent hundreds of hours shadowing doctors, and the more and more time that I spent, the more that I felt like maybe this is not for me. So I put in for a deferral, which would be essentially a year off before going to med school. This is in 2008. The economy tanked, and my parents had essentially felt that they had, all these years, all this sacrifice that they had made for their children, to become either doctors or lawyers, and now their son was, washing dishes at Taco Mac, right, waiting tables, and trying to become a DJ, right? So they thought that they had completely failed. And, when I was washing dishes at Taco Mac, that led to another opportunity of washing lab equipment at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. And I had an opportunity there to also get involved on the website. So I started doing their user experience, basically enabling websites for the blind and those with disabilities, so Section 508 compliance. And while I was there, this is really kind of the origin of Crisp, I bought a camera because I figured it'd be nice to learn how to take pictures, and this could be a lifetime hobby. And my hobbies historically have become more than hobbies. So I got obsessed, and I originally was taking pictures of flowers and plants, but then that turned into a photography business. Then that turned into a video business. And we were working in hospitality, events, working with Live Nation concerts, things like that. And there was a time we had about 80% of the market share in Atlanta. But what I found was that generally 50% of our clients would just go out of business, like these bars and restaurants every year. So there was just a lot of turnover there. And then also, if it rained outside, that would impact our business, right? People just wouldn't go out to events, when it was raining, or if it was if there's any sort of inclement weather. So that led to a pivot to more of a corporate business, which is really where Crisp was born in 2012. And there was no real focus outside of doing video for corporate brands like Red Bull, Verizon, Coca-Cola, etc. And at the time, I was just relying on like contractors. I don't think I even had any employees. Ironically, when my parents came over to America, they had $500 to their name, and I did when I started Crisp. I had the same, it wasn't the same $500, probably a little bit less, to be honest. But we started the business from nothing, no investors, no partners. I tried to get loans, but no bank would give a loan to essentially an entrepreneur with no track record of success. Starting a video company, and we had we were working with all different types of businesses, whether it was filming a bar mitzvah or a soccer tournament, or working with Coca-Cola. But there was a lawyer who came to us, and she was a phenomenal attorney. I didn't know anything about the legal industry at the time. And she's a great lawyer, but just didn't have the resources to compete against large advertisers. Like she didn't have the financial means to do TV or radio or billboards or anything like that. And what we could help her with was creating a bunch of great video content and then placing that content on social media, which in, around 2013, 2014, just there wasn't as many, like, let's say law firms even advertising there. It was basically a low barrier to entry. You could just post content. And it was another way to be able to differentiate and stand out and get your message out there where you couldn't compete on traditional avenues. So her business explodes. I mean, I think she like tripled in size. She refers us to another lawyer. We do the same thing for them. And then they refer us to another lawyer. And then as I start to work with more and more law firms, I realize that this is essentially a very saturated, commoditized, very competitive business where consumers have a difficult time telling one firm apart from another. And it's almost like a David versus Goliath scenario in that there's a lot of big advertisers that have a ton of resources. And then there's over 95% of the market that can't compete with them on spend. So I looked, inward and said, what are we really good at? And we're good at helping, businesses in saturated and commoditized markets stand out and differentiate. So that's what really where Crisp was really born. We niched down into legal in, I believe it was 2013 or 2014. And that is the only, we only work with lawyers and law firms, that we say no to everything else. And from video that evolved into marketing, because we would create these great videos, but then our clients would say, well, what do I do with them? Right? Like they put them up on their website, they put them in their email signature, they put them on social media. So then we actually started doing the social placement. So it was like Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. That's now expanded to streaming networks. And once the phone started ringing, the next pain point was, okay, well, I have all these calls coming in, but how do I handle the intake, or how do we handle the capacity challenges, or we don't really have systems in place. So that's where we introduced the coaching. And now, we've grown to support about, I think it's 1,107 law firms in probably every state in the U.S., several countries as well. And it's whether it's video, marketing, or coaching. Coaching is now the biggest side of the business, like leadership coaching on, Chris, as you know, everything from how to develop a great team, how to increase profitability, how to basically scale a firm from 6 to 7 figures, 7 to 8, 8 to 9 figures. And we really look at law firm growth as a holistic solution, right? I don't know that it's any one thing of saying, hey, it's a video, or it's running ads, or it's being in a mastermind. I think there's everything beneath the iceberg that you have to focus on all of these elements together, and you have to get them all right, from how do we stand out, to how do we get the phone to ring, to how do we ensure that the firm is able to scale and the team is aligned and works together, and that the systems enable the firm to be successful long-term. So it's probably a condensed way of how we got from, immigrant in 1990 to today.
Well, and there's so much to unpack. And I guess the big question I have for you is, now you're running this 8-figure company, you're coaching thousands of attorneys, it can't be easy. So what's the toughest leadership lesson that you've learned along the way? And how do you stay so grounded when the stakes are so high now?
Well, I'm glad you think that, right? In terms of staying grounded, I work very, very hard at that. We're still learning a lot of lessons. I would say that from the lesson to me has always come down to people are everything, like everything. Even in a world now where we're leveraging technology and artificial intelligence, and there's so many benefits there in creating organizations that are just much more efficient and effective. But it's everything is a people problem, right? If the root of any problem is people. At the root of any solution is people. So meaning that if something's not working out, either you don't have the right person in place or you don't have a person who is accountable for that. And if something's going right, it's because you have somebody who's really great, who's enabling you to solve those different challenges. But I think perhaps the most difficult challenge is, how do you get these people of anybody, whether it's in your law firm, people that you hire that come from various backgrounds, that have different skills and different strengths and different capabilities, to all align and work together as a team every single day to accomplish this bigger vision, and then also continue to develop their skills, because we as leaders are always the bottleneck, right? And from the standpoint of like, I kind of give you the bonus lesson, and this does require a lot of humility. So this is very much like the accountability mirror. But I've generally found that if somebody is making more money than you, and I say this respectfully because money's not everything, but they're generally better at at business than you, right? So when I was starting my business and I'd see all these companies that were more successful than ours, I would say, well, how can this be? I'm smarter, I work harder. I would think, and if they're not so smart and but what I had to face the reality of is just, they are better at this than me, right? They have figured out something. Maybe the skill is different. Maybe it's not academic intelligence. Maybe it's their ability to build relationships. Maybe it's their ability to be talent attractors in terms of like the people they can bring into their organization. Maybe it's how they're able to rally their team and align everyone. Maybe they're able to solve very difficult problems. They have different skill sets, but it's always wherever your firm is today, your firm is perfectly designed to give you the results that you're getting, right? Meaning that there's absolutely no way that your firm doubles in revenue and doubles in profit unless something drastic changes. And that always starts with your own capabilities as a leader, because at the end of the day, like if you were doing everything right and you were making every right decision, then you wouldn't have the problems that you do, that you presently have. And if you can start making different decisions, which does require mental shifts and different capabilities, then you can have different outcomes, because we all have the same constraint of 365 days in a year, 24 hours in a day. We spend our time differently. We make different decisions.
One thing that Chris taught me was the mindset shift. And, I know on your podcast, The Game Changer Attorney, you explore what it means to kind of challenge the status quo. So what's one mindset shift you think anyone, entrepreneur or not, needs to make to unlock their true potential and create this real impact?
Well, I would say for one thing, it's just that everything is man-made. So I'll give you an example, man or woman-made, whichever someone prefers. But my wife and I, it's funny, when we will drive in a parking garage, like an empty parking garage, and there's always like those arrows and those signs that say like, go this way. And I will sometimes see a path and I'm like, we can be a little bit quicker if I just cut through here. And she's like, but the arrow shows to go that way. And I'm like, someone had to paint this arrow, right? Like this didn't exist before, right? And that's a man-made thing, right? And I'm not saying go out and break laws or anything like that. Like, hear me correctly. I'm just saying that if, a big mindset shift for me was that if you look at the success, let's say that somebody else has, right? And obviously comparison can be the thief of joy, but if they could do it, so can you, right? And if you were to replicate their habits, their decisions, and their courage and so on, that you would have very, very similar outcomes to them. So and a lot of times, you don't know in terms of what they were doing in the shadows on those late nights and weekends and so on. But I think it's just realizing that no one is anything special per se, right? I'm not anything special by any means. I think sometimes people can feel that way about people that they idolize. But if you actually peel back the work, and just like, for example, I mean, this is like having run marathons and so on. And there probably was a time where you thought, man, I don't know if I could ever do that. But then if you break it down and say, all right, well, here's the plan in order to be able to do it. Here's what we're going to do with diet. Here's what we're doing with exercise. Here's what I was basically on a week to week, month to month basis. I've seen people that couldn't run a mile to then running an Ironman, right? And it's just being able to break that stuff down where, we're trying to teach our kids this very powerful lesson of, it's not you can't, you just haven't done it yet. You absolutely could if it's something you were committed to, and then you were to actually break down the steps and you had a plan, and then you were executing on that plan every single day.
One thing that I want to talk to you about is that personal growth journey for you, because I know I've been in the stadium, I've been in the rooms with you when you've shared the picture of the before and after, and the transformation that you've undergone. And I know, physical fitness, the Pelotons, cold plunge, and all that's important to you. Can you talk about kind of your routine and the things that you do to keep your mind and your body healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. So the common entrepreneurship track is that sometimes we start healthy And then we are working like 60 to 80 hour weeks for years straight, especially as we're starting our business. And then we achieve financial success, but then we lose our health. And then once you achieve the financial success, then you're like, okay, you know what? Now I'm going to focus on my health again, right? Meaning that you either had some, like for me, I spent 10 years of doing these like 70, 80, maybe even 100-hour weeks, 7 days a week. And I used to pride myself on how hard I could work. I'd say, maybe I'm not the smartest and, I may not have all the talent, but I could outwork anyone. And I took it almost as this badge of honor. And that landed me in, at one point, in urgent care. It was, even though I was lifting weights and exercising outwardly, I may have looked fine. But in 2022, I got my lab work and it was not looking good. And I know so many entrepreneurs that are having, heart attacks, and some that aren't even with us today. It's tough, right? So you think if you want to have longevity in this, if you prioritize your health, and in everything from physical health to mental health, like business is very much, I wouldn't say, sometimes people say it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think it's both, right? It's a marathon and a sprint at the same time, right? You got to sprint a marathon, right? So I look at it from the standpoint that, and I'll answer your question about the routine, but I've generally found that what I just described as a typical entrepreneur journey of losing your health, and then once you make money, then you have time, then you focus on your health, I think is completely backwards. Right? Knowing what I know today and all the firms that we work with, I really do think that you start with the personal growth and then it leads to professional growth. You even said this at the summit last year, and I agree with you 100%. It's not something that becomes the thing you focus on later once you've made it. It's what enables you to be successful and to be able to make good decisions. So when I look at my routine, and it doesn't even have to be complicated, I really think there's three main facets, which is number one, sleep, right? Like it doesn't even matter what else you do. If you eat perfectly, if you exercise, if you don't have your sleep locked in, if you're not getting good sleep, all decision-making is compromised. And I'm not somebody who sleeps 9 hours a day. Like there's an Arnold Schwarzenegger quote where he says, you got to sleep quickly. So I'm usually sleeping 7 to 7.5 hours, but I build sleep into my schedule and I work everything else around that. So meaning I'm consistent about what time I go to bed. I'm up at 5 a.m. So I'm usually in bed by like 9:30, right? It may not sound exciting for a lot of people, but it's, I'm hardcore about, making sure that it's lights out. Got a noise machine. It's pitch black. It's like there's consistency there. The other piece is going to be, of course, exercise. So I'm doing weight training maybe 4 or 5 days a week. We've got like a small home gym. Nothing crazy. It's usually working out 45 minutes a day. And then the final one is nutrition. So you can never out train a bad diet. Right? It doesn't matter how much time you work out or how many miles you run. The reality of it is, if you look at it just as at the mathematical problem, right? It's like you gain weight when you essentially consume more calories than you burn, and you lose weight when you burn more calories than you consume. So from a nutrition standpoint, it's ensuring that I aim for about 1 gram per of protein per pound body weight, and I eat. I don't drink alcohol really. I don't really much sugar, like that sort of thing. And I know some people are going to hear this and say, hey man, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. Right. And I used to think the exact same thing. So it's like when my wife and I are on vacation, like, sure, I'll have a margarita. I have like nothing against it. But when you start tracking this stuff, and that's actually kind of the point I'll lean into. Like it's not unusual to track metrics in your business. Right? Like you would think like, okay, we got to track our revenue, our profit, our intakes, our average case value, our time on desk. Like that makes sense to track. You're like, how would I'd be lost if I wasn't tracking metrics? And yet, why aren't we also doing the same thing with our health, right? Like, why aren't we tracking the food that we consume and the hours that we sleep? And like, if you are literally the bottleneck of any sort of progress that you can make in your life, and the purpose of all this, so the whole routine doesn't take a whole lot of time. Like you can get all this stuff done. I do a lot of walking, and I have like a walking desk too, but a workout's 45 minutes, and then you just go to bed early, and then you plan out your meals in advance. So you're eating like good fats, good carbs, like good proteins. I don't subscribe to any like fad diets or anything like that. But the purpose of those things is that when you show up every day in the business, that you are energized and you are essentially leading by example, right? Like I think it can be exhausting to have to be faced with very difficult decisions constantly, and the stress that we have to carry as business leaders. I don't think there's any, really, you're not getting around that it is stressful to grow a business. But if you are also lacking sleep, and then you're eating a bunch of, garbage, essentially that's what you're fueling your body with. And at the same time, you're not exercising, it's going to be 10 times harder. And then your decision-making is probably going to be compromised. So to me, I look at it as just the table stakes of how can I be like a high impact leader. So that's my approach to the routine.
I want to talk to you about kind of the vision, and I know the vision of Chris, I'm sure, changed from day one when you first started with that $500 to where it is now. But the most powerful, crazy, I went to the summit that was at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. That's when I signed up, and there was some, just incredible speakers on stage. I'll never forget Jesse Cole, Kevin O'Leary's up there. Arnold Schwarzenegger was that year. I mean, you guys had just a blockbuster lineup, and I signed up. Our first workshop was on vision and your firm's vision, and that's really where things changed for me. That day was the light bulb moment for me. That's the day that I've shared on this podcast that I'm sharing in the book that I'm writing. And so everything that moment was what changed everything for me. So kind of talk about vision of how important a vision is to a company, and more importantly, the vision of Chris when you started. And now I know the big impact that you guys are looking to make, and I know the impact that you've had on my firm and on other firms that I'm very close with. So can you talk about that impact and that vision?
Yeah, vision drives decision, and it's having true clarity around where you're trying to go and what are you trying to do. And vision goes beyond I just want to grow or I want to do a little bit better. The value of having vision is just both for you and your team. And when you have this clarity, it's energizing, right? Like the vision question we like to ask is that if you had everything you needed to succeed and you couldn't fail, like what needs to happen in your law firm, let's say over the next 5 years for you to be ecstatic with your progress, right? So meaning that, and that's a very intentional question, because sometimes when people are setting their vision, they set it based on what they believe they can do today or what is attainable, right? Which is that, if you ask them, does that excite you? You're like, probably not, right? Like maybe grow by 5%. But what if you had everything you needed to succeed, like all the resources, let's say there weren't financial constraints, and say you had all the people that you needed, like what would make you ecstatic? Like what would you look back on and say like that was worth doing and that was exciting? Because you're never going to be able to sell anybody else on anything that you yourself are not sold on. So it's like you got to be excited, and it doesn't mean it's like it becomes Price is Right of like which law firm owner can come up with the biggest number, right? It's got to be for you. Different people can want different things. You can have a vision where you want to make a particular impact within your community, or you want to be able to increase average case value and focus on these specific types of cases, or you want to grow to a certain, let's say you do want to grow to a certain revenue number, right? We don't demonize people for, I think being a great lawyer and making, a ton of money are not mutually exclusive things. I think they go hand in hand. It's how you're able to support your team and provide for your family and provide the best representation for your clients. So, the best visions I find are ones that are quantifiable. So like you'll know when you get there, right? Something you can track, like you could put a number to it. It's not some vague, ambiguous thing. Two, there's generally, about others and about serving others and not yourself, right? It's kind of like our success becomes a byproduct of helping others succeed. And it's also number three, it's got to get you excited. So if the present vision that you have doesn't get you excited, then the cool part is you just get to set a new one, right? And then everybody in your firm should be able to recite that vision. Like if you were to call on any of them at any point, you say, hey, what's the vision for the firm? They should all be able to answer it. But that starts with you. So our vision for CRISP, it started as we wanted to help 1,000 law firms grow their revenues by $1 million each. Okay, so that was, our aim was to make a $1 billion annual impact, and we say by $1 million each, like $1 million in annual revenue each. And this was, I believe, this was originally in, I think it was like maybe 2015 or 2017 when we set that vision. And at the time, people were like, there's absolutely no way, because we started at zero. So how are we going to help 1,000 law firms grow the revenues by $1 million each? Well, last year, and like we hit this target finally, right? So it was in November of 2024. We actually hit it a little earlier in October, but we helped 1,000 law firms grow the revenues by $1 million each. But then inflation hits, right? And you think, okay, well, what's $1 million these days, right? We would joke internally and say, and the purpose of that vision at the time was that when we set it years and years ago, helping a law firm grow to $1 million or by $1 million meant that it wasn't just about making more money. It was that the firm was able to just transform entirely, right? You could have a foundation in place, the impact, the number of clients they could serve, like how they could enable their team to be able to, achieve their goals. But we set a new vision at the end of last year, which is now to help 10,000 law firms grow their revenues by 10 million each. So we basically took that $1 billion vision, turned it into a $100 billion vision. And that's what I mean by infinite vision, because people used to ask me, over probably the last 5 years, they're like, well, what's going to happen when you get there? And we have like a tracker here at the office internally. It's almost like, it's not a thermometer, but we could see how we were pacing to it. And they're like, well, what happens when you hit 1,000? And I'm like, oh, well, I just will be done then, right? I'll just, we'll sail off into the sunset. I say that jokingly. I'd say, well, we'll just pick a bigger number, right? If you can help 1,000, why not help 10,000? So that's what I mean by having an infinite vision. And then it's about our clients succeeding. So like we only win when our clients win. So if we help 10,000 law firms grow by 10 million each, that would be a massive, like transformative impact on legal as a whole. The number of communities that would serve, the number of team members that would support, how it would transform the lives of various firm owners. So that to me is exciting and worth doing. And we had this discussion internally, like, well, if we believe we can do it, then let's get after it. So it should always excite you. That's where I would say vision is important, and having that clarity.
So I've got to ask, is you've built this amazing company, and I know a more recent addition to building a great company was now building this amazing family, and you have these 2 daughters. Talk about the lessons learned in parenting versus the lessons learned in business.
Oh man, I will say, I probably empathize more with the parenting than the business, because when they're kids, they're starting from scratch, right? So we have 2 young girls. We have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and it's amazing to see things through their eyes, because everything they experience for the first time. And I will say on the business side, it's like, well, by the time somebody's an adult, right? Like there's certain things that they should no longer be doing, right? Yes, like our toddler can kick and scream on the floor, right? For 20, 30 minutes, but when an adult does it, it's not so cute, right? So I would just say a lot of like my first child was crisp, right? This is before we had kids. So I feel like that those lessons really helped me as a parent, both me and my wife. I think it teaches you a lot of patience. I think it also teaches you the importance of mindset. So this is something that's really big in our household, of just, we read this book all the time. It's called like the magic of yet, right? Of just understanding that it's not that you can't do that, you just have not done it yet. And then how we always encourage them in terms of just growth mindset, right? Growing up, many of us, I remember when I was in school, there was, they called in my parents at one point. They're like, hey, he just sits here and he's just looking out the window, right? We should put him in some special classes, right? He's just bored and like, he's not doing the work. And my mom, to her credit, she came in and she spoke to them. And then when they looked at me, basically the work I was doing, I was just done early, right? Like I would just finish the coursework early while the other students were working. And then I would just obviously just sit there because I had nothing else to do. So I look at our kids and say, look, they don't necessarily have to fit in the traditional academic system, but our aim is to set them up to be people of value, that have confidence, that can gain skills and capabilities, all of those things that enable them to be able to stand on their own later in life, right? Because it's either you to teach them as parents, or the world will, right? So I think there's a lot of similarities, honestly, in because we want to encourage accountability. Like they have chores every day they've got to check off and things that they can do. I mean, there's obviously the 6-year-old can do a little bit more than the 3-year-old so far, but it's just being an advocate of their success. And then, I'm trying to think of any other lesson that I've learned. I mean, it's just that what I think is perhaps gratitude. What a gift it is to be able to, I've asked this at workshops before. I said, when is the last time you did something for the first time? And for some of us, it's like, man, I got to think back. I don't know the last time I did something for the first time. But with kids, it's like almost every day is something that they're experiencing that they've never experienced before. Like we went ice skating with our girls, like they'd never been ice skating before, or, we got a basketball hoop, they'd never played basketball before. Like there's just so many things that they experience. And when you can experience that through their perspective, you start to become much more present in the day-to-day. So I think perhaps that's the lesson that has actually carried over to the business, where I've aimed to be much more present. Like with kids, they'll call you out, right? If you're looking on your phone, if you're not there, they'll say, my oldest said, Dad, am I more important than the phone? And I'm like, oh man, that just cut through the heart. You just got to put the phone down right then and there. And we're all guilty of it. I know it's not the right thing to do, but I can't be the only person listening to this podcast who's ever been on their phone around their kids. But that level of presence is so important, that if you carry that over to the business as well. So like when we're in meetings, like the aim is like, look, you've got my full attention. Like, let's be completely locked in here. We can make the meeting much more efficient, probably even make a shorter meeting, versus us being on our laptops or distracted or doing a bunch of different things. And I think it's also about a level of respect that you have for your team when you do that.
The last thing I want to ask you is, when you started Chris with $500, I'm sure you didn't know that it was going to be what it is today. And now you have the Game Changer Attorney podcast that I know you just celebrated your 5th year of doing. You wrote this book that, is obviously a number one bestseller and has helped, so many law firm owners. I know you got Entrepreneur of the Year. Crisp has been awarded so many different awards. So, kind of what are you most proud of that you've accomplished at this point?
Wow. It's funny when you say those things, and all I think about is like, man, we got so many so many problems to solve, so many barriers to overcome. Like it's, again, I don't think again, I do recognize a lot of the milestones. Like, don't get me wrong. It's, I could probably be a little bit better about celebrating them, but I don't feel like anything that I've done is anything special. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it. In terms of being proud, I'll tell you what excites me today. The first one is when our clients win, right? Like that is amazing. Like when you come across someone and the first time you meet and they're stressed out and exhausted and spread thin and they haven't been on a vacation in years and they're working 80 hours a week and they just don't know which way is up, but they're a good human being. Like they're not afraid to work. They're not afraid to ultimately dig in. They didn't go to law school to learn how to grow a business, right? Like they just came out and decided, look, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to open up a law firm, but I don't know the first thing about hiring or leading people or, delegating or organizing. And when you start there, and then a year later, their whole life has been transformed and they're healthier and they're going on vacation with their kids and they're doing, like, to me, a vacation is where you don't take your laptop, right? And they're just like, that to me is incredibly gratifying, probably more so than any of my wins. I think the second thing is with our team. So in the past couple of years, we had more people pay down like all their student loan debt, all credit cards, they bought homes, they started families. I think it's really cool to be able to create an organization that enables people to create opportunity like that. People that have, like, we wouldn't be where we are today without them. I really do think it's like, teamwork makes the dream work sort of thing. But to see them win, I think is amazing. Like I will take a win of any of our team members over any personal win. Like I get way more fulfillment from that. Right. So it's, I had this conversation with James Lawrence, right, Iron Cowboy, the other day, and one of the things that he shared was that once you reach some sort of milestone or some mountain, the way you can find that next mountain is, okay, how many people can you take with you, right, and how many other people can you help, right? So that to me has become much more meaningful. That I'd say I'm most proud of that, and it's probably those two things: our clients, our team, seeing them win. That to me is probably the most gratifying at this point.
Well, Michael, I can't thank you enough for what you've done for me and the impact that you've had on my life and those, at my firm. It's just been incredible. I know I'm constantly inspired by you, and the impact that Crisp has made on my firm is just absolutely amazing. So I can't thank you enough. I know you're busy, and I don't want to take much more of your time, though I could spend all day with you. I know that you got things to do, so I can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you so much for being on First Light and sharing your story.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Wow, what an incredible conversation with Michael Mogill. From his relentless drive to his insights on courage, storytelling, and leadership, Michael's story is a reminder that no matter where you start, you can build something extraordinary with the right mindset and action. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your journey and lighting the way for us all. Until next time, keep shining your light.